and you put a playlist, and I was like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen."
Oh man. Yeah,
I've never seen that in a book before.
I actually do see it in a lot of books now. I think they're copying me. No, but
Probably.
I concur.
Absolutely.
but
That's it.
but
You said so.
I honestly put nearly as much into the playlist as I do character development and everything. Um because not only are the characters often mentioning music, like in everything that counts, the main character is obsessed with Weezer.
Right.
Because in my sci-fi series, I have a character that's really obsessed with Justin Bieber, and people are like, "Fuck Bieber." Every person that seems to read this book is like, "I hate Justin Bieber," and I was like, honestly, that was a little bit the point, that this girl is obsessed with like the poppiest of pop, and how you kind of hear it everywhere, and it's an earworm. And at the time, especially when I was writing it, it was around the time Justin Bieber came out with like Lonely. And some people were like, oh, well, he's a really good musician, but like, whatever, I'm not down with him. So I kind of almost wanted that feeling when they were reading this character to be like, well, I like Justin Bieber, but I don't want to like hang out with him. Although I think that'd be an awesome day, to be frank, to have an afternoon with Justin Bieber and be like, dude, take me whatever's happening. I want to go see what's happening. Well, now that because I'm rewatching it along with you guys. And when I see it, especially, I think it's so interesting. I'm not a parent. I mean, I do have a friend who is a parent, but when you guys are talking about Michael in particular, I am so intrigued because I had never thought, I was like, oh, he's just a dad. Like, I never, but the way you guys are going into like, oh my Lord, Michael, get your act together with your son is hilarious. Cause I'm like, wow, I never even thought about that. And then years later, when Harold was talking about playing the character and how he's like, oh, I didn't want to come off as this kind of father. I was like, dude, I never, like, no offense, but that was not, Walt and Michael are so independent in my mind. Yeah, just really, I guess as far as writing, if you do want to write a book, the thing I say is you have to treat it like a job. I force myself, and I know this sounds bad, but I force myself to edit because that is, you want to lose your mind when you're rereading your own stuff. But you have to force yourself to do it because you have to make a product. You have to make something, and you don't want to cot in your head all day because you have to sleep. You know.
Yeah.
Um. So I really force myself to write and edit every day, and I didn't realize I was doing it till I was halfway through. But I did publish a title every year of my 30s by doing that. Every teenager that read it has said that there was a particular side character that both of these teenagers were like, I'm so thankful you wrote this gay character. And I was like, what? And they're like, both of them were like starry eyed and so thankful. They were like, oh my gosh, I loved seeing myself in this gay character. I loved it. And I was like, okay, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. And since then, I have had a few other teens be like, oh my gosh, I know what you're talking about. I do also relate to this character and yada yada yada. But the thing is when I wrote that character, I just wrote him as he existed. He just existed that way in my head, and that was him. And when someone else was interpreting what I wrote, they were like, "Oh my gosh, this dude is gay."
Oh, wait.
But yeah, I mean, I will say it is. I'm so blessed for the Houston writing community because they really, I mean, some of these people, like I said, I've been in a critique circle on and off for about a decade. Some of these people, they've seen me become the author I am now. And I'm so grateful for them because a lot of them are older than me and some of them are old enough to be like my parents, but they didn't judge me when I was coming in with these, stories about getting dumped at 19. And they're like, okay, girl, like put a pin in it for a minute, let that roast and then move on with your life. Yeah. I don't know if I'll ever publish it, but at the time I had published 4 books when I had this feeling of like just emptiness in my head. And I was like, "Oh shit." So like many normal people, I decided in order to solve my problem, I'm going to sit on my couch and watch Netflix. And I turned on a movie called The Old Guard, and it did star Charlize Theron, and I swear halfway into it, I was already thinking about my next series, my sci-fi series that I'm currently working on. So, and ever since those characters have been in my head, and I kind of can't wait till they quiet a little bit because it's pretty loud. No,
For you.
I I have a strong belief that there are 2 things you should never do as an author and publisher, and that's create your own covers and that's edit your own book. Now, I have a friend who is a graphic artist. He did his own cover. He's also a trained graphic artist. I am not. So I thankfully do have a woman named Heidi Dory who does my covers. I hope to God she never retires because I will cry myself to sleep because I do get a lot of people that when I try to do a lot of in-person events because that's where I get my most sales and I like to meet people and talk about my stuff.
Mhm.
But the people are always like, "Wow, your covers look so good for an independent author." And I'm like, "Well, thank you so much." So,
Yeah.
the funniest thing I've ever heard is one of my books I dedicated to her. And we don't really talk about my writing a lot because I she is a big fan of my newer stuff, but when I was starting out, the romantic thriller series was kind of spicy, and I was like, I don't really want to talk about that with my mother. But it came up not too long ago. I was like, oh yeah, well, I dedicated that book to you. And she was like, oh, Melissa, I didn't even finish that book. I was like, what? And she's like, "Honestly, Melissa," she's like, "I'm not even sure I opened it." She's like, "I did buy it though. I do own." I'm like, "Well, I appreciate that." She's like, "But I don't even think I opened it." And I was like, "Well, no offense, I'm not dedicating another one to you then." So, to grandfather or to like his friend. And I was like, "No, it's like his buddy." And she's like, "Oh, well then he'd say it like this." And then she said, "Well, what part of Mexico is he from? Because he might even say it." So we went through 89 branches of dialogue on how to say, "Hey, motherfucker." And and then later when it came out, I did work with another guy who was Mexican. I was like, "Hey, could you just verify?" Because I was like, "What if she like, was a little
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
accidental?" And he's like, "Oh no, that's accurate." I was like, "Oh my god, this is hilarious that she."
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That she was like, "Oh yeah, let me help you, mija. Oh yeah."
I love
And I was
that.
like, "Okay, yeah." But
I
yeah, very, very supportive. I
love
did intentionally make him black and Blake white for a purpose because this was essentially the high school I attended. And to be frank, I got to be honest, on my hand there were maybe 5 black kids in my entire grade. And I think there were 2 Mexicans and they were related. So I mean, it was the least diverse. Everyone was white.
mhm,
And as I was writing the book, I was like, how interesting would it be if Blake, who is white and in this very suburban, idyllic life, has always lived as a white man. And then his best friend, when they're talking about prom and they're talking about getting dates to prom, his best friend Jasper is like, well, I can't just not get a date because I'm a loser, because I'm a geek. I can't get a date because I'm black. And Blake was like,
yeah.
what are you talking about?" And Jasper's like, "No one wants me to come and collect their, daughter, their blonde-haired, blue-eyed daughter."